Our first program today is How Much Do College Students Know About GMOs? A pilot study. And talking with you will be Stacey Stearns and Aditi Rao, from the University of Connecticut. So it is all yours.
Hi, my name is Aditi Rao. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Connecticut, and our study is about how much college students know about GMOs. This, of course, is our pilot study.
And my name's Stacey Stearns, and I'm a communications specialist with the University of Connecticut Extension. And we are going to maybe transition slides. We'll just roll with the technical issues. No, but that's okay. The blue light's blinking, but there it goes. Okay. So our topics that we're going to cover today are. I'm taller than Penny too. So the topics we're going to cover today are the pilot study, the methods that we used for it, the results. So we've got GMO as a pilot study. We talked about consumers and how we communicate with them about it, what worked, what didn't work with those consumers. And then we're going to cover the recommendations that we have. And this is for whether you have and use GMOs on your agritourism operation or you don't. So either way, it can apply to your agritourism operation, and now it's working. So our background information on this project. At the University of Connecticut, we started a working group on GMOs in 2017. We realized that there were a lot of us that were looking into this, working on it, and so we started collaborating about it. The premise of our working group is that we're pro-science. So you can be for or against GMOs, and that's okay. Our goal is for our consumer and our farmer audiences to make their own decisions about GMOs. So we started in 2017 with a survey of the farmer and the consumer audiences because we needed to ascertain what they already knew, and especially with our farmers, what information that they needed from us. So that survey went out through our existing extension networks, through our different educators, vegetables, fruit crops, livestock, and we surveyed the farmers, got information back from them. Alongside that, we surveyed the consumers and found out what they already knew about GMOs, and then we analyzed those results. And this pilot study builds off of that. So our farmers told us that they needed more information to share with their audiences. They get a lot of questions, or they were receiving in 2017, 2018, when we were collecting these survey data, questions about which crops have GMO. They needed more educational outreach resources. And these were farmers using both GMOs and non-GMOs. But it didn't matter. Consumers have questions, they're going to the farmers and asking these questions. So we decided to do this pilot study after we completed a bunch of these educational outreach resources. We did a website first. We created a fact card that we then distributed to our farmers through our extension networks. We created animations, we hosted panel presentations, but then we wanted to actually test these communication resources that we created and see if they had the results, the intended effect with the consumer audiences that the farmers were hoping for and asking for. And these are farmers similar to you. Some of them have farm stands, some of them do agritourism, but they were Connecticut farmers. So a little bit of the history on the GMOs. Most of you know they started in 1996. With the first use, the approved use in the United States. And since then, there's been both scientific and societal kind of social debates about their use. They've become a really divisive topic, and that's part of the reason that we pursued this. We also looked at previous research when we were doing this, that emotional storytelling helped farmers connect with their consumers when they were college-age students. And that emotional storytelling didn't necessarily get college students to buy more products on the farm, but it built the relationship. So that was part of what we were looking at here with this study. And then, so our goal, understand how farmers should communicate with their consumers about GMOs. So the methods we used was, we have Qualtrics survey software at the University of Connecticut We went through the institutional review board, we got approval for this study, and we created a 33 question survey that was distributed to our undergraduate student audience. We selected undergraduates because we have easy access to them, and that's why it's a pilot study. So the survey included scale, multiple choice, text entry questions, and there was a stimulus halfway through. And that stimulus, there was the control group that received this wonderful video on how we select the chocolate chips for our ice cream at the Yukon Dairy Bar, which we're very proud of our ice cream. And then our test group saw this animation about the American chestnut tree and the GMO version that's could potentially save the tree. And this was one of the communication resources created by our team. After the stimulus, about halfway through, and they were randomly assigned as they're taking the survey, we had the GMO questions again that they had taken before the video to see if they had any changed perception based on the stimulus. And oh, try again. There it goes. That's okay. So we're going to just think we still have time and we can cut the video off if our time is short. But we're going to have you watch the video just because it'll give you a little bit more understanding, and I'll let Claire take it away. You don't get to see the chocolate. Oh. You don't get to see the chocolate chip one, but if you search Yukon chocolate chip ice cream on YouTube, you can watch that one later if you want.
The American chestnut was the most important tree species in the northeastern United States. American chestnut was important for its beauty, edible nuts for both humans and wildlife, and for excellent wood qualities such as straight grain, easily worked, and rot resistance. Chestnut trees grew rapidly and were once huge, growing over 100 feet tall in dense stands. They could be seen in both urban and rural landscapes. Uses of the chestnut tree included wood products, nut crops, forage, biomass, and biodiversity. The American chestnut tree dominated the eastern deciduous forest and once covered most of the eastern United States, including the Appalachian Mountain chain. But then, a pathogenic fungus, a blight, was introduced in the early 1900s. As a result, the American chestnut tree is now nearly extinct. It remains today, but barely. The tree survives mostly by means of suckering, a form of asexual reproduction. Due to the blight causing stem girdling, the tree rarely reaches sexual maturity, failing to produce nuts. Lack of sexual reproduction also threatens the loss of genetic diversity within the species. For decades, forest scientists, including geneticists, have searched for ways to introduce blight resistance. There has been some success by crossing with other species of chestnut, but the compromise is that the hybrids are always intermediate in shape and size to the once proud tall chestnut. Researchers at the State University of New York have been using science to try to discover a way to revive these majestic trees. Doctors William Powell and Charles Maynard created an American chestnut tree that is blight resistant. This GMO product was accomplished by introducing a wheat gene coding into the genome for the American chestnut tree. The genetic engineering technology attempting to save the American chestnut tree can also be used to manage diseases affecting other trees, such as the American elm tree. Diseases such as Dutch elm disease may be controllable through GMO technologies. Blight may have destroyed most of the original American chestnut tree. Science has the ability to bring back these majestic trees, their beauty, and the ecosystem services they provide.
Okay, so as a part of the study, we sent out a survey to undergraduate students because we have easy access to them. And it went out to over 300 students, and it was randomly, and Qualtrics randomly assigned them into two different groups. One was the test group, which saw the video you just saw. The other group saw the chocolate chip video. So from this, we found that overall, 79% of the students said that they know what GMO stands for. We also asked students about their willingness to consume GMOs, and this was measured before and after watching the video so that we could see if the video actually made a difference. So surprisingly, the video actually reduced their willingness to consume GMOs. It also reduced their trust, their knowledge-based trust and identification-based trust on GMOs. So knowledge-based trust seems pretty self-explanatory. Identification-based trust talks more about their feelings towards GMOs, like how they feel, or do they feel good about consuming products that have GMOs, and how do they feel about knowing that a product they're consuming has GMOs. So like I said, 79% of them know what GMO stands for, and over 40% of them said they never check for GMOs. But we did find a significant association between those who said that they know what GMO stands for and those who actually check for GMOs. Pretty slow. Okay. So we also asked them a question, one of the more common questions of like, which crop or which produce do you think has GMOs? And the top answer was corn. And you can see the darker the shade here and the larger the words, that's the most commonly answered responses. Apple, cotton, potato, soybean were the others that a lot of people thought are the crops that are commonly that are a common GMO crop in the US. Like I said before, majority of the students said they never check for GMOs in a product. 40% of them said that their knowledge about GMOs is average. About 31% said that it's somewhat below average. So the next slide has a really interesting set of results. We also asked the students who, according to them, would be the more trusted source when it comes to knowledge or information about GMOs. And not surprisingly, reading a scientific study or talking to a university professor or researcher were the top two responses. I mean, they're undergrads and we taught them well. But you can also see the last four, or the last three, rather, like a food company or manufacturer corporations, conversations with friends or family member, and social media posts by friends and family members were the least trusted sources. I do want to bring your focus to the fifth one, that is conversation with a farmer, because that's going to lead us into our recommendations.
So again, this is undergraduate students. So they haven't had a lot of access in some cases to farmers. But what we can take from that data point from this pilot study, as well as our previous surveys of both the consumer audience and some other work we've done, evaluation work of our extension programs. And you all probably know this as agritourism operators are working in this field. Consumers have a lot of trust in their farmers and in their agricultural producers, and they're looking for that connection, and they're seeking you as someone who can give them advice and guidance on these topics. We expect that when we do this study with other audiences, that number 5 on the list for our undergraduate students will increase, and that other demographics will have even more confidence and trust in the farmers, agritourism operators. So with that in mind, we have just some best practices, both from our other work and from this study, on communicating with your consumers. And most of these are probably not new to you. You're probably already including them. But what we've learned with our farmers in Connecticut, our agricultural producers, is that it's always good to have reminders. And I think so. We're just going to go through them really quickly, but being transparent about your use of GMOs, whether you use them or not, and then your personal reasons, the science-based reasons that you are or are not using them on your operation are always useful. Sharing your general knowledge about GMOs. We've seen it consistently with all of the studies that we've done, this one included, that there's a lot of misunderstanding about which crops. There's a very small number of crops approved in the United States that have a GMO version. For example, one version of the pineapple, one apple variety. So sharing that knowledge with your customers, whether you use GMOs or not, can help dispel some of those myths and that misunderstanding. Big thing coming out of all the GMO research, we never answer what's in it for me for the consumer. So my favorite example is that a papaya producer in Hawaii, have an agritourism operation, might talk about the fact that we cannot enjoy the papaya on this Hawaiian farm without a GMO variety because of the disease that was affecting it. Do an audience analysis. What we saw here in the results of this study, they're not coming to your agritourism operation necessarily to learn or to have all this science-based information pushed at them. Figure out what they want, cater to that, give them a little bit of information, and then keep it focused on whatever they want to enjoy at your operation. And then don't be afraid to cite the research. There's plenty out there. There's more ongoing because we don't have all the answers about GMOs. And collaborate with universities and colleges where applicable. We're one example. This came from our producers. They asked us for more information, and it's why we did this. Other universities and colleges will work with you as well in your home state or country. We only have 1 minute, so if you want to slide through those.
So quickly, the limitations, like we said, our study sample was students, so it's not a generalizable sample. Limited demographic diversity. The study that we deployed in the class, it was definitely more white, had more women, and it was a gen ed course, so definitely concentrated within a few majors. The videos were not graphically similar to each other, but we picked these two videos because they were similar length. And lastly, most importantly, the survey results were pre-pandemic, and a lot of things have changed after the pandemic.
And speaking of the changes after the pandemic, we polled you, and thank you to everyone who completed our poll. When we polled our farmers in 2017, they were getting a ton of questions about GMOs. And those of you that responded, only 30% said that you're still getting questions about GMOs on your agricultural operations, on your agritourism. So that number is decreasing. There's fewer confusion. However, if you're familiar with GMOs, USDA just changed the term to bioengineered, and there's a new labeling law. So we're going to wait and see how this all comes out. And our plan at UConn is to continue studying this, move this pilot project into other demographics and see if our results hold true. So with that, we'd just like to thank you for your time and attention, and we can answer any questions you have.
Hello, excuse me, sir. Please use the mic.
During your surveys, did you had any taste spontaneously tasting of this any GMO like corn to taste the student? That's how's the GMO and non-GMO corn taste like?
No, this was a purely like online survey.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I have a question that what is the general perception of the students on GMO foods? Good for the health or bad for the health or neutral for the health?
Well, I can speak to the survey results, and from what a lot of them.
You were asking from the students about whether they know about this your study about the GMO foods. What type of perceptions you are expecting from them?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, you are asking, you are asking knowledge about this from the students, university students about GMO. Did you check what type of perception they are having? That means whether they are positive or negative or neutral. That's why what they know, they may know it's about bad or good for health or neutral for health.
Oh, so well, that was the aim of the survey, to find out what they feel about GMOs, and a lot of them said they don't even check for GMOs, and we only found out 79% even know what GMOs stand for. So a majority of them don't even check for GMOs. So I guess it's not even part of their criteria to assess a product or a produce when it comes to assessing them. But once we did show them videos, we saw that their willingness to consume actually reduced, or their
identification based on knowledge-based trust actually reduced. So it could have been a factor of the communication that was sent out, which is our video, or other factors that were not taken into our study. As we said, it is a pilot study, so the next phase will definitely take in a lot of other factors into the design that we come up with.
Thank you. Are there any questions from remote viewers? We have remote participants. Well, hello, folks out there online all over the world. Any more questions from the room here? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was curious too, if you would similar question to the terminology in the future, GMOs for food, versus GMOs for, the chestnut innovation seems more like selective breeding, right? So I wonder about differentiating between GMOs that you're consuming versus GMOs for other agricultural crops and products.
Yes, so that's an excellent question, and we studied that first with insulin because GMO insulin was one of the first products, and we have an animation about GMO insulin as well. And so in other studies that we've done, we found that the chestnut tree insulin, when it's for a health issue, it has a higher rate of acceptance, and this is consistent with the research conducted by other universities too, than when it is in a food product. Now, if you start differentiating in food products, the papaya, because it would have been completely gone, the GMO version, has a higher rate of acceptance than corn or soy, where the connection with big agriculture, big pharmaceutical, any of that gets muddled in. And so just to expand too on your audience, we did differentiate in our study this colleges, the majors of students, and that, interestingly enough, played in, and we haven't done the full analysis of all of our audiences based on their experience level, but we found that different majors, again, it's a demographic thing, so our agricultural majors were more supportive versus our majors coming maybe out of our School of Fine Arts. So that was another interesting way of looking at our data that needs us more work to do on our educational outreach. And we're happy to answer more questions. Email either of us, we'll follow up, share our study information with you too.
We have time for one more question, if there is one more question from anybody. Okay, well, thank you very much. And of course, you can continue the conversation on the website, what's it called? WUVA? Yes, yes.
And we'll put our links to our videos and everything there.
Okay, thank you for doing our present. Okay. Our next presenter is Eli Harrington, and Mr. Harrington is going to talk about what you need to know about cannabis and hospitality. So Eli Harrington from Greenbridge Consulting in Vermont. There you go.
Right on. All right, thank you very much. Here to talk about cannabis and agritourism. Now, this is pretty specific and niche, and I know a lot of folks here, this is an international audience with people all over the world. So just to kind of set the scene, cannabis is becoming much more broadly accepted, and in Vermont, our regulations have changed quite a bit in the last few years, affording us this opportunity. So everybody's not going to have the same legal context, but a lot of the messages that we've learned are universal, and they will apply to other folks, whether you're involved in conventional agriculture, tourism, hospitality, research, and extensions. It is all relevant, we think. So most importantly, whenever we're talking about cannabis, we need to start out. Just have a button. You just have if you want to. When we're talking about cannabis, first thing we always talk about is our acknowledgements. And the next screen just says acknowledgements in black, so don't worry about missing anything. Sure. So the history of cannabis, is millennia old. Again, I'm talking to a global audience here. I don't have to tell folks, coming from the subcontinent, coming from, the mountains and the Hindu Kush, and eventually integrating and moving through globalization all the way here. So the point is, cannabis has evolved with humans forever. We have an endocannabinoid system. We know that thanks to a lot of the research done by Israeli researchers all the way back to the 60s, where it's been less encumbered by legal. And then obviously the utilitarian purposes of hemp, fiber, rope, clothing, all of these no-brainers. Food, animal food, huge opportunity we're missing right now. But a lot of the contemporary history here in the US has been through medical patients, and our prohibition of cannabis has harmed thousands, millions of people. So we can't talk about cannabis without first acknowledging, one, the sacrifices of those medical patients and all the people who had to suffer and fight to be able to access cannabis instead of pharmaceuticals. And also, as important, if not more, the people who have been victims of prohibition and are still being punished for this. So we're in a privileged position here in Vermont to be able to talk about this openly and to be able to show this and actually to be able to integrate this. So why is this? Cool, nice. They can't see you, by the way, in there, so don't worry. Everybody who's watching this remotely, nobody raised their hand. Why this matters, this is a current snapshot of the US. The blue states are where adult use is legal and or regulated. So various states of regulation. The green ones are medical. The blue ones are some form of adult use. And we don't drive through the white ones. It's pretty much where we're at here. Oh, nice, found the pointer. So this is perceptions of cannabis, people who have tried it, people who have smoked it, and seeing over time how that has increased. It's not because cannabis is new. It's not because we've gotten better at advertising. It's because with technology, it's hard to cover up the lies that have been perpetuated about the so-called dangers of this plant. Now, for those of us in the Northeast, this picture is 2 years old, and this tells us, again, how many cannabis consumers live in the region. So for us here in Vermont, that means New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. These are all states which, if we go back here, are now legal. So all these folks here, which is our entire tourist base, plus probably even more significantly in Quebec, over the border, this is legal. So what does that mean? It means that visitors to Vermont and many Americans increasingly expect to access and consume legal cannabis, including while traveling. So that's happening societally, and we're seeing now some things actually shake out on the ground. Really interesting. Some states are speeding along faster than others. A lot of this has to do with money. I hate to say it. Unfortunately, cannabis, agriculturally, the simplicity is here. It's the most simple, from an agricultural cultivation standpoint. The regulation and the bureaucracy is the differentiating factor. So the people who succeed in legal cannabis they're the best cannabis growers, they're not the best farmers. They've got money, the ability to get through the regulations, the timing, all of these. So we're seeing different states unfold at different speeds, different kind of rules and regulations. For us here in Vermont, we have, since 2018, possession, cultivation, consumption. So I can grow mature plants at my house in the front yard. I can dry them and smoke them at my house. I can give them to my neighbors as long as there is no quid pro quo and no money exchange. And we've seen this really have a rapid change in people's attitudes. And when you're talking about cannabis reform in other states, the way that we did it in Vermont, first getting rid of the criminality, ending the prohibition, that was the most important. That led to normalization. People, oh my God, the sky's not falling. I can walk down the street and there are just as many people smoking pot in Burlington as there were before. Nothing really changed except for now you had all these growing demographic of cannabis users over the age of 50 and 60. So now we've got folks like my parents who can now add cannabis plants in their garden. So this normalization has really been impactful in changing people's attitudes. And then the next question is, well, all right, so why aren't we selling this? Why is the state not
selling this and controlling it. Cannabis, you know, a lot of that has happened. You know, we will fill any void, you know, and with cannabis in particular, the opportunities are so obvious that as regulations unfold, you have a lot of gray area and you have a lot of places that are still open to interpretation. This is what we've really been trying to work through with our cannabis tours. It's trying to eliminate some of this, work with the state and the regulators, our control board, our agency of agriculture, and find out a way to add some certainty to some of these questions about what's legal in cannabis. I talk to hospitality operators, you know, people who are in the conventional tourism space, and they want to be involved. You know, here in Vermont, we've got a huge wedding industry, you know, events, festivals. So, you know, what can these people do? You know, they can know the basics, they can make their own rules. You know, you can't sell people cannabis at your bed and breakfast or at your inn. But you could designate an area and tell your guests, if you were inclined to legally consume this, I'd rather you do it on that corner of the property, downwind near the farm, versus that corner of the property that's over there by the school bus stop. So we're trying to educate people in hospitality, understand what they can do to be a part of this cannabis sort of, I guess, revolution. But then we also have questions for cannabis, you know, conventional agriculturalists and farmers. Is cannabis something that they can get into? And not just cannabis for smoking and getting high, talking about industrial hemp. COVID really jacked up the price of building materials, and people are really considering hempcrete as a more viable option, which is amazing. I'd love to just talk about why everything. So for non-cannabis farmers, there's an impetus to consider. For cultivators who are doing cannabis, we are a tier 2 license. So we have gone through this for the last 7 years I've been involved in this. An event organizer, also cultivating outside. So we have a tier 2 license in Irisburg, Vermont, which is about an hour 45 north of here in the Canadian border. And we grow 312 cannabis plants. We are licensed by the state of Vermont. It costs, I would say, we're up to probably close to about $10,000, not including any labor, to get through all the licensing, the permitting, the bank accounts, all that. But Vermont has started to license cannabis cultivators and has been very intentional about allowing outdoor cannabis cultivation and, in fact, encouraging it. Now, we are limited. Cannabis is an annual crop if you're growing it outside. And so for us, our season is very short and it's very difficult, you know, in Vermont, especially where we are, zone 3, 1,000 feet. Getting this through the fall and through the harvest is definitely a challenge. So we have been able to, through the state, get ourselves licensed. There are about 160 cultivators in Vermont who are licensed. Many of them are outdoors. So we have, like any other agriculturalist, any other farmer, any other small business, we have to figure out how can we get the most out of this product? You know, what else can we do with this product, with this property to attract people? And how else can we convert it? So for us, the answer was clear, to do cannabis tours. And I'll pass around this poster if people want to check it out. And there is, we'll see, maybe we can pull up a news clip afterwards if the tech gods are with us and show a recent news clip. So we have been trying to figure out as well, how can we do this? Because we need to diversify. We can't just sell cannabis. You know, we know that in Vermont, this is not a monocrop state. We are small, integrated, diversified producers. You folks have been going around and seeing a lot of these places and experiencing it. So just like we can't just sell cannabis at the dispensaries, we also want to sell the experience. You know, we want to be able to bring visitors to our farm. And for us, we are also doing other agriculture. So nobody in our collective is monocropping. I raise chickens for eggs, do meat birds as well. We have pork farmers, we have hothouse growers who do salsa and tomatoes. And so for us, cannabis is long-term not going to be our one thing, right? I mean, in Vermont, in small diversified agriculture, you can't just have one thing. So for us, cannabis is a way to also sell vegetables, sell chickens, sell eggs, and increasingly get people onto the farm to buy those directly from us. So one thing that's really been interesting about the cannabis farms is that, again, we can't sell you cannabis on the farm, but once you get there and we walk you around, we talk about cultivation, we show you the plants, we answer a lot of your questions. What we can do is we can sell you those eggs. You know, we can sell you that stay at the hip camp, you know, the chickens. Maybe you come see us at the farmer's market the next week and buy some of our hot sauce. So it works both ways. You know, cannabis is a gateway drug, and I try to flip that and say it is. It's a gateway to agriculture. You know, it's a gateway to knowing a farmer, to visiting a location. People would not come visit my farm just to see the squash, you know, and hang out with the chickens. But, you know, we had a couple hundred beautiful, stinky Christmas tree sized cannabis plants. And now we have a draw. And now we're having conversations on the farm about things like GMOs and growing organic and cultivation techniques. Now, something that has been really interesting and surprising through this experience, again, our tours are very difficult with the current regulations because basically the mindset is that a cannabis farm is not a farm. It is a secure location where millions of dollars of a dangerous drug are being produced, and don't tell anybody where it is or let them come on it. So the biggest questions that we have are about security. You know, and the state asking us, are you worried about having all these people come to your farm, you know, and hosting them? They are going to see your plants. They can come back and take them. And we are the test study. You know, I mean, I think, frankly, a lot of the success of this cannabis agritourism in the future of Vermont depends on if we get robbed this season. Security concerns are a concern on any, you know, farm, depending on what you're doing. But people in Vermont, because we've had it legal for a couple of years now, a lot of that's worked its way out. You know, the high school kids who go steal the hemp plants, people understand, you know, it's not worth the work. There's going to be dogs, you're going to get shot at, and then you get this big ass plant and you got to go take it home and dry it for a month before it's even good for anything. So it's not worth it, guys. Don't do it. The security is a concern, but again, we really think that the best way to address this is with transparency and by demystifying and destigmatizing this. You know, when you come to the farm and you visit and you see these plants, oh my God, you know, I mean, most people have never seen a field of 100 THC cannabis plants. Now, you can also do this at the farms. You get to walk around. It's a beautiful day. There's chickens and dogs running around. You know, you can drink a beverage. You can bring your own cannabis and smoke it, you know, in the private part of the property. So when they get on the ground, they say, wow, this is a great experience. I've never learned anything about this plant, but I like the outcome. So that for us is also really important because in the cannabis industry, we are competing against controlled environmental agriculture. You know, a lot of the cannabis that people smoke is grown inside. That's been by necessity, you know, because of the illegality. And I think because of that, cannabis, you know, cultivators and consumers have come to expect that cannabis is grown inside under artificial lights in tents, you know, in a closet or something. Obviously, ecologically, that's insane. You know, I mean, and I know a lot of really great people who are indoor cannabis cultivators, and I think there will always be a place for it. But from an environmental ecological standpoint, it's absolutely insane that we shouldn't be planting this plant, which is, you know, it's carbon sequestering, you know, I mean, it really does a great job of filtering a lot of toxins out of the ground, which for better and worse, depending on your soil quality. But for us, we really need to change this paradigm. So for us as cannabis producers, this is another really important part of the tour, is that we need to invert people's thinking about cannabis and say, hey, cannabis that's grown inside, beautiful, it's pretty, you know, it's pristine. If you're a medical patient and you need that cleanliness or you need that strength, awesome. You know, but for everybody else, if you're a consumer, where does your food come from? Who made your beer? You know, where did the grapes grow? Can I go visit the field where the grapes are grown? We need to invert this value proposition and outdoor cultivators to be able to have a premium on this product so that we can sustain ourselves as small 2-3 person family operations, small producers. We need to invert this and keep the premium high. So part of the subversive part of these tours, which are being successful so far, talking to potential future consumers, Outdoor cannabis is more expensive. You see how much work it is. You see all these plants, you see all those stakes. You know, you want to come back here in the second week of October, you know, and spend all day out here harvesting and get hash rash all over your arms and all this stuff. You can see how hard it really is and come back and trim it too, if you'd like. So part of these tours is also changing that value proposition and saying, hey, you've never seen outdoor cannabis. You don't know why it's this valuable, and you don't know why you should be paying more than indoor cannabis for this, because we are, again, carbon exchanging. We are creating small jobs. And guess what? The more of my cannabis that you buy at that dispensary, the more chickens I can raise, you know, the more eggs I can raise. Maybe next year we can do a strawberry patch as well. You know, maybe we can have our pears be turned into a cider and add cannabis to it. All of these possibilities. But if people don't come and don't see it, they have no way to know. So right now, the biggest surprise to me has been the demographic, and I will be very glad to answer any and all questions forever about this. Demographically speaking right now, 98% of the people who come on the tours are over the age of 60. They've maybe are casual cannabis consumers. Usually it's a couple, they're my folks' age. They're maybe semi-retired. They live in a legal cannabis state. They grow a couple plants. You know, the husband smokes and the wife doesn't. You know, the husband smokes it, the wife grows it out in the garden. This is not a gender stereotype. This is just literal profiles of people. And, you know, they're casual users, and they've, you know, he used to buy pot from his nephew down the street, and now he grows it and gives it to the, you know, gives it to the other uncle. So it's been really interesting because I thought we'd have a lot of, you know, maybe younger people, you know, cannabis, it's sexy, it's cool, it is, you know, it is an intoxicant. But really the interest has been more people over the age of 60. They want to know, and they want to ask about gardening. You know, they want to say, hey, when do you cut your plants? You know, why do you stake them like that? What do you use to prevent botrytis and powdery mildew? When do you harvest? So it's been really encouraging thus far. And I really want to give our state a lot of credit. I've had to work with the regulators about these standard operating procedures. You know, we do have to do crazy things to make this work. As far as we meet at a third party, I'd love to have people just come to the farm, but I can't advertise the farm location because I don't want the wrong people to show up, right? So we have to pick people up at a third party. We have to check their IDs. We have to record all their information and keep a log. We give them a visitor badge. But if we do all this, we can actually bring people to the farm. So a big shout out to the state of Vermont, the Agency of Agriculture, the Cannabis Control Board, really working with me and these other small producers to figure out how can we do this in a safe, secure way? Because this is, you know, we talk about the Vermont quote unquote way. This to me is how Vermont is going to succeed at cannabis and thrive. And when you're in Massachusetts, you know, when you're in New Jersey, do you want to buy cannabis at a strip mall that was grown in a warehouse somewhere? Or do you want to come up and buy it directly from the farmer, or buy it from the dispensary that got it from that farmer whose farm you went to visit? So for us, a lot of these are really universal lessons that we're just taking from agritourism and applying to cannabis. But because of the timing and the interest, and again, just the sex appeal of this plant, it's a really interesting time to be involved with it. And for those of you that live in legal states or states where it's evolving, you know, this is really what we want to be promoting. We just need to get out of this security mindset, you know, and get out of this fear mentality and embrace this as a plant that's been living, you know, we've literally evolved with the cannabis plant to have an endocannabinoid system. So it's, again, a lot of this stuff is no brainers, but until you actually do it and prove the concept, it is terrifying to regulators, to law enforcement, to these other people. So we're all invested in me not getting robbed this year now, right? But this is sort of a test case, and you know, I'm more worried about climate change and having dumping rains and hail, you know, and 30, 40 degree temperature swings, frankly. But there are still concerns that remain as we work it out. So we've got one more weekend. If anybody's local, we are going to be doing these Friday, Saturday, and Sunday up in the Northeast Kingdom. If anybody is sticking around or is local, we're only able to do these seasonally, late July, once the plants are established and they start getting big and we've got them supported. And then we're usually done by Labor Day. We're harvesting in early October, typically, depending on the weather. So we shut it down after Labor Day to focus on the plants and kind of maintain the biosecurity. But we've got a really nice window of time. And we hope that this will be a template and we can do this with other Vermont producers and small growers and even folks elsewhere. So please, any and every question. I did not bring cannabis for people to the presentation in the morning. So yeah, sorry, that's the bummer answer first, but
Thank you. Hang on a minute. We've got to do the mic questions.
oh yeah.
So yes. So in terms of security, do you pat people down? Do you actually let them in the field? Does anybody ever try and help themselves to an inflorescence and stuff in their pocket?
Yeah, so thankfully, I mean, it's such a, the product in the field is, there's enough processing work required, that people would steal it and they'd be bummed out to find out how long it'd take them to get it to a usable product. We have right now, the way this works is that our farm, so the property itself, within that we have designated the cannabis establishment. So there is a fenced off area. That part is highly regulated. So I have a background check. I had to pay $500 to get it. Only myself and other licensed employees are allowed inside that cultivation area. So what this means, and this is again, common sense. I don't think the state planned it like this, frankly, but common sense is kind of working out like this, where we say, hey, the rest of this farm is open to the public. Everybody can come up here, but these areas are our permitted areas and we have them fenced off. You can't go upstairs to the drying area. You can't go over here. And also just as part of our licensing process, we all had to submit security plans. So there's cameras, there's gates, there's controlled points of access. And again, recording everybody's information, keeping a log. If somebody comes in and messes with the plants, it doesn't matter. I'm already heartbroken and ruined, so like, it doesn't really matter if we get them on film or not, frankly. Our insurance will also never pay out. I assume they will cover absolutely nothing, for the very expensive insurance policy we had to get. So there's not much hope, but again, you just have to have faith and, I could not be a cannabis farmer if I didn't believe in good energy, and have some patience and faith.
Okay, we have other questions. I know there was one back here.
So by having these tours, are you allowed to do any other kinds of events on your property, or do those regulations mean 100 feet away from anything that's growing, can't have children?
Yeah, that's a great question about what kind of events we could do, because we would love to. I mean, can you imagine, like, people would like to get married on a weed farm? That is already a thing. Right now we're limited by, again, we're sort of able to, because we have these small groups and these security procedures, bring people onto the property without bringing them inside the licensed establishment. I do not suspect, it would be better for everybody for the state to kind of close that loophole and clarify it. So what we're really waiting for here in Vermont that's going to open a lot of things up is a consumption permit. You cannot consume in public, but what does that mean? Well, obviously I can't walk down the street smoking a joint. Nobody's ever done that in Vermont. But does public mean a place of public accommodation? Because if you're an innkeeper and you have a wedding at your property, what do you tell the guests? Is it okay? I mean, this is a place of public accommodation, but it's a private event. So we try to act in the best spirit of the law as far as if we have events, they are all ticketed and everybody has to be 21 plus. Nobody's doing events at cannabis cultivation facilities yet. I think there's just too much risk factor of even just having other people be involved and be around. I mean, if you think about each of those plants being worth $1,500 to $2,000, at the end of the day, at a wholesale, cost, you do have to mitigate your own risk. And also for me, I mean, the interesting part about these tours is I'm more scared of other growers coming to my property, bringing something else on. Having people who know nothing about cannabis, have no pathogens and they're not coming from grows with pollen and powdery mildew, like, that's ideal for me. So biosecurity is more of the concern. The way that we clear this up for everybody in Vermont and beyond is to just have a catering permit, just have a temporary event permit. You want to have a wedding at your farm, you hire a caterer, they've got a bartender, they bring the kegs in, they serve the alcohol in the designated space, they go home at the end of the day. We could be doing this, not on our farm, but I could go to my neighbor's farm, bring our cannabis, bring an ID checker, set up a tent, have edibles out there, and actually be able to tell people and instruct them. Because this is the other thing with consumer education, and it is a danger. I mean, danger, quote unquote. Maureen Dowd set us back probably 5 years with her, overdose on edibles, but this is a real thing. People, do not know. A lot of folks haven't consumed cannabis in a long time. Dosages of illicit market products are not always accurate. So there's a learning curve for consumers too. For me as the tour operator, this is another reason why I have a third-party transportation company and why we pick up and drop off at another location. So that was one thing taking that liability completely out of my hands. I used to have a van and drove these things myself. It was a lot less fun and a lot more scary. Way better to just hire that out and then we take that liability out too. I know this gentleman had a question, please.
Yeah, but this lady.
Oh, sure.
One question. I'm from Belarus, Eastern European country. And 100 years ago, we were like a country of cannabis, but our people never use it as a drug. My question is, does it exist another type of cannabis without drug component?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what's opened the door here in Vermont, I mean, cannabis is a really broad term, that family includes, cannabaceae, that's hops, right? That's a lot of these sort of bud bearing plants. Within cannabis, industrial hemp, again, that's frankly way more interesting than getting high. The idea that we could run tractors off of a plant that we grow ourselves, feed our animals, all from within there and build structures. So industrial hemp is much less regulated. And I think actually, Belarus and Eastern Europe, I know that's pretty, there's a lot of cultivation over there. Yeah. And and even with seed, this is a big thing that's holding us back here. Again, not having hemp seed approved for animal feed is crazy, in the US. We need that to happen immediately. It's so incredibly nutritious and it's so available and so productive that the oil. So these, but with your question too about kind of more marijuana style cannabis, I guess that's what I'll call it. Plants with bud, that are producing the resinous oils. Not all of them get you high in the same way, and we're really learning a lot about the different compounds in them. CBD, cannabidiol. That one has been really prevalent, and that was selective breeding, genetic modification. So now that cannabis has become more mainstream, people are starting to pull a lot of different individual substances and cannabinoids out of it. Part of that to me is disturbing because it will be pharmaceuticalized. Companies are trying to patent these compounds already, trying to formulate them. And that will be, some of that's going to happen, and some of it will be for better. They will have conventional drugs that come from cannabis extracts that they pull. But yeah, right now, I mean, the CBD, has really been, that's been a huge breakthrough. People with neurological disorders, and also just people with acute inflammation. It's been really good. And now they're starting to see other similar cannabinoids like CBG, is one that's used. CBN, is one that as THC degrades, it increases and gives you kind of more of a couch lock and a heavy sedative feel. And we're actually starting to learn more of these things like, hey, one thing we talk about on the tour is say, the variety of cannabis that you have is going to be the most important factor, and localized genetics. I mean, this is really so interesting because cannabis has not been standardized, commercialized at a national level. So we really still have all this really cool biodiversity around, where the plants that I'm growing flower 3 weeks before the plants that they would normally flower. I've got a short season. I only have 60 days, maybe a flowering time before it gets too cold and everything starts molding and rotting. So I need my plants to flower in August 1st instead of August 15th. So the biodiversity is really, really exciting. We just can't let the powers that be try to control it and patent it. And this is something that is an ongoing discussion. But yeah, right now, I mean, the localized genetics are opening a lot of worlds, and even just people understanding things like terpenes, flavor profiles, and compounds. I mean, the same thing, the linalool that makes lavender smell like lavender, that's also what makes cannabis smell like cannabis. These sort of substances that are in other plants are also in cannabis. So we're finding a lot more, and the more that it kind of comes out to light, the more interesting it is. But yeah, I find that a lot of folks don't want to, again, sun-grown cannabis, typically not going to be as powerful as stuff that's grown inside. for a lot of reasons, including just the market they're going for. So that's actually something that I've learned, that people have said, like, actually, I would like to be able to like smoke a joint of this and still function, or like, I don't want to take one hit of this, or I tried one little edible and I was, on my back for 2 days. People actually want to have options. And so it's nice because sometimes the stuff that is sun grown isn't as powerful and is a better way to get people, more acclimatized and just not having a bad experience.
I'm very sorry, everybody, but our time is up. And please, will you be willing to hang out for a minute? and
Yeah.
Answer other questions. And you can also continue the conversation on the website on WUVA. So I want to thank everybody for being part of this session, including those of you who are watching from other parts of the world. Thank you very much for being part of it. And a big thank you to Eli and for coming here today.
Thank you.